bad points. Are we ready for bad points? Just over a year ago, we released the build video for this gun, but I've been shooting Longthorne trigger plates for, well, just under 2 years now. So today I'm gonna go through and give a full, honest review of my experience, the good, the bad, the pretty, and somewhere in the middle, we're gonna be talking about Tweedle, who have an amazing competition for one of these exact models of gun, a Longthorne Valkyrie. So where to start? I mean, I know where to finish because you guys all want to know what bad stuff I have to say about this gun. So let's, I suppose, look over it. You have a Longthorne proprietary pad at the back. These are all made in-house, and the thing about Longthorne that is quite special is they make, I mean, pretty much every single thing in-house. Everything is done in-house by Jim and his team in Northampton, which is exactly 101 miles away from where I'm sat now. This pad is not the state that they come in, and I really should make a point to say that. They come in various lengths, but when I got this gun, I was a little bit thinner, and me and Jim made it a little longer than it should have been just to see whether that's something that I liked. I've never shot a gun that was too long before, so I thought it was worth a go. A lot of people I know prefer a gun with a more open stance a bit longer than perhaps they should have technically, and I thought, let's give that a try. I didn't like it. A large portion of my job involves shooting other guns. So I'm used to shooting guns with a 15-inch stock, so we took a bit of length off. And I say we, I felt it was a bit long. We were going to go and film at the Northern Sporting Weekend at Bywell, so I took a hacksaw and I cut the middle out and I super glued it back on as a temporary fix. And although I've been up to Longthorne many times since, I haven't picked up a shorter pad. So that is the story of the slightly rough looking pad. As standard, they are beautifully finished in with the gun, but I ruined it. The wood is an absolutely wild piece of exhibition grade walnut. I love it. You'll remember I picked a piece for the first stock, and that stock still exists, and we'll come on to talk about that in a minute, what the plan is for that. But this is stunning. It's exhibition grade burr walnut. You've got beautiful contrast, and as wood gets older or more used, generally speaking, it gets more depth. And this has, when I first picked it up, it wasn't this dark, the contrast wasn't as high. But as time goes on and it gets, not beaten around, but it gets a bit of life and oil and extra stuff rubbed into it, it does just gain something. And I like that a lot. I never was into burr walnut, but I genuinely think it's one of the most beautiful pieces of walnut I've seen. It's wild. There's always something new to look at. And I could look at the base plate there forevermore. I went for the grip tech stock on this gun, and I love that grip tech. The concept being that it's a semi-glove grip. It's a palm swell custom designed to your hand, and you don't really need this piece of wood here, but it does. It certainly just makes it look a bit different. You could take that away and it would look a lot more conventional, but it's nice to have something slightly different, to be honest. You've got little panels of checkering on here, and one of the top secret things that Longthorne do is their checkering, and I can't tell you how they do it, but it is wonderfully innovative and very, very clever. Longthorne have a lot of cool little secrets of how they've developed the process to build these guns, and it's epic, and I can't talk about it, and it burns me. But moving on from that, I really like this grip. I love the angle, I love the shape. Obviously it's made for my hand, as every grip tech is made for every customer. Their standard grips are nice, and I have a game stock in the making currently with that long grip that we designed a few months ago. Jim loves his upright grips, and they're very practical, but I also love the slim profile of that game gun. It's really nice. The action I've got is a trigger plate action, so that all the action is housed on the trigger there, and we'll take this stock off and have a look in a minute. It's side plated as opposed to side lock. Longthorne make two models, a trigger plate and a side lock gun. Side lock over and unders are not as reliable as trigger plate over and unders. And given I don't look after my guns particularly well, I mean, I service them and look after them in that way, but they are tools for breaking clays and hunting at the end of the day. Maybe that's a bit harsh. They are much more than that, but what I will not do is let this gun, its quality and its beauty, get in the way of what a gun is designed to do, and that is to use. If I've got to drag it through bushes, I've dragged it through bushes, because at the end of the day, this is a tool for making stories and memories, and if your gun is of a quality that prohibits you maximizing on those memories and stories, that's silly. What I do have is a oil finish. This is a true oil finished gun. This has been out in the rain and the muck and went into various levels of humidity for a long period of time. I do like it. I prefer a matte finished gun, but this really shows the walnut off beautifully. So there's no complaints there. And the finish has stood up very, very well. I've marked and bashed the stock quite a bit. I've got a series of marks on the side here where I was hip shooting and I had my zip down on my thing and I scratched it. It's another reason not to shoot from the hip, really. It's just stupid and childish, but it is fun. Every single one has a story and I don't regret a single one. The Valkyrie action is just the trigger plate action inside, but the engraving pattern on it I think is one of the most beautiful things on earth. It is laser engraved. Each and every engraving that Longthorne does is designed by Jim and Elaine, who are the couple that own Longthorne's daughter, Chloe, and she does an amazing job. She definitely steps outside the box of tradition and comes up with things that I think are just wonderful. They're great ways to adorn metal. There's no hang-ups there of the old world being a relatively new company. And although there's plenty of nods to honour it, I just think it's one of the most beautiful engraving patterns out there. They do offer hand engraving, but I know that they don't really like doing that. Firstly, because it's something they do out of house. And they do hand inlaid gold and hand inlaid numbers, so they do a number of things in-house. But to have an entirely hand engraved gun, they then have to use out of house people, outworkers, and that's just not their way. They want to do everything themselves. More importantly, it adds a lot of cost. And that's not a problem if the customer wants to pay for it, but it also adds a lot of time. You know, a fully hand engraved side plated gun, you're adding another 6 to 8 months onto the project. And I know that it's not something they don't want to do, but it's not something that they actively encourage. And to be honest, when the laser engraving is this good, and you know, they're not doing it on a cheap machine in a back room, they're doing it on a hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds worth of machine. And that's how they get laser engraving this good. Love in the design and quality in the process of the actual work. It has an adjustable trigger that goes back and forth. It has multiple notches, so you can put it on like 7 different settings or something. It's nice. I mean, you can't really get that excited about a trigger. Once it's set up in the right position, I've never felt the need to change it. The trigger guard on this one is one of the first ones they produced. Jim did say that I should move on to a more modern one or the later one, and that actually has a piece of metal designed to fill this gap here. But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. I should probably get it changed, but it's not something that it upsets me or bothers me. A bit like this, the first guns all had this torque screw in the bottom. Nowadays, they all have a slotted screw. Popular demand said that although this is practical, it's not as beautiful as it needs to be, so they changed it. Which, to be fair, it certainly looks nicer, but I kind of like that this is the original. I kind of like that it winds people up, that it doesn't look like as good as the other ones. But you have slotted screws on the side, and that's fine. My gun is a non-selectable manual safety gun. You can get auto safes and you can get selectors. The safety catch is quite large. They do a slimline version now if a customer desires. They put that on the game guns, I believe. But it's really practical once you've used it a lot. It's such a positive. It's a very loud click, isn't it, Sasha?
Yeah, boy.
I just can't help but not want to change it. I quite like it. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice that my stock is cracked. Coming back from America from the US Open, it didn't get handled with love and care by the airport staff. Yeah. But it's been fixed and repaired, and I tried not to get worried about it. Jim and I spoke about making a new stock, but practically speaking, it's fine. The gun swings on these 2 trunnions around the 2 little hinges on the barrel. These are interchangeable for oversizes. They do multiple oversizes. It's quite a sensible system. In fact, it's a system used by many gun makers now because it's so sensible. And it locks up on these 2 little protruding lumps here and here. It has a hold open top lever with a little hold open device here that's unlike any other top lever hold open. It's kind of weird and wonderful, but that is Longthorne's MO, doing things differently to everybody else. Alright, so you've had a look inside. Nothing's perfect, but this is damn close. So let's smoke some close up to see if we're actually hittable. Pull! Quite easy to shoot straight off the top of that second one. Before we finish this round of sporting, let me share a thing with you. It's a good thing. Tweedle are doing another competition for a Longthorne, a Valkyrie no less, which is going to be almost identical to this. It's not going to have a grip tech. You can have the standard grip or the game grip. 28 inch, 30 inch or 32 inch multi-choke barrels in a 12 bore. I genuinely think this is one of the most beautiful guns in the world, as I've said many times. And if you think that you like it or that it's beautiful or want to be in with a chance of winning one, you can. It's a very easy competition. It's a very simple question you have to answer, and it's £25 an entry with 1,600 entrants. It's pretty good odds for 25 quid of winning, well, what for me is a dream gun. Guys, check them out. Links in the description. Good luck. All of the trigger plates are named after Royal Navy battleships beginning with V, and the side locks are named after Royal Navy battleships beginning with B. I love the concept. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Before we talk about the barrels, let's just finish talking about the engraving, because it is a beautiful pattern, but one of my favourite things about the engraving is the background. It's done like a wood effect or bark or reeds. There's something actually really deep about the way that it's done, that the entire background is textured. A lot of people leave it flat or stippled, but this has its own life to it underneath that beautiful shiny layer. And the side plates are all done that way, and the action bar is all done that way, so you end up with some kind of contrasting light either way. I love the flowers, I love that acanthus scroll, I love the holly leaves in the background. There's just holly leaves. And there's so much going on here, you can't not fall in love with one of these. I don't think it's that loud at all, because actually when you haven't got a huge studio light bouncing off it or artificial light, where you don't catch the light just right, it just quietens down and it looks just French grade and beautiful, and I am a big fan. Although I've been talking with Jim about having it blacked for 2023. Maybe that's a step too far, but it would be fun to have something a little different. I know a few other gun makers black heavily engraved guns, and I've seen a few of them when we're out in America. It's clearly a more American thing than it is a British thing, and I just think it's quite nice. The barrels are legendarily made of one piece of steel. Go and watch the video. They take a 27 kilo lump of steel and they turn it down into these, a 1,500 gram set of barrels. What that means is they can make things like titanium barrels, which we made a video on and I fell desperately in love with, as well as other things. Nobody else to date has ever really made these, although the technology, the concept is quite old. Whitworth came up with it a long time ago, but lacked the technology to be able to do it. And it took Longthorne, or it took Jim, a lot of attempts to figure out the best process to make these reliably. And so he did. There are numerous benefits to making a barrel out of one piece of steel, but realistically, let's look at the negatives. It's really hard. It takes a lot of very expensive machinery, a lot of time to make a set of barrels like this. And that is obviously a large portion of the cost. And I spoke with Jim about whether they'd ever consider making a more reasonably priced, more affordable option, because they're not unreasonably priced, a lower price point gun. And the problem is just to make the barrels on their own, even for another brand, they'd end up being sort of £3,500 to £4,000, give or take, just for those barrels, let alone then fitting them to the gun and the rest of the gun and the stock and the forward and this kind of thing. So there is a large portion of cost just attributed to these, let alone getting them all right, fitting them to a gun, getting them proofed, all that kind of thing. These are all extra costs. But there you go. It is an insane concept. The benefits are numerous. They used to do a marketing thing where you used to stand on the barrels, and I remember when I first met Jim and Elaine at EWA 2019, of standing on a set of these barrels and they don't bend. I've not yet stood on mine. It's amazing when it's your own gun that you don't feel quite so keen on jumping up and down on it. But it should take it. I think that's the point. But that's not really the point, because who's going to take their barrels off mid-sporting course or mid-drive and jump up and down on them? No one. And you're not going to let your friend park his Range Rover on them either. The real benefit comes in that strength and stiffness. The rigidity of these barrels mean that recoil is delivered unlike any other gun I have ever shot. Muzzle flip is very minimal. You get a very straight drive recoil, which you can tell on the over and under when you shoot it versus other guns, because they act very differently. And a lot of that is also to do with the fact that this, I think it's the lowest profile over and under on the market, pretty much. I mean, it's tiny. Given there's other low profile actions out there, however, it's not entirely the design spec that allows for a slightly smoother shooting gun. It is the barrels. That flex on the barrels is reduced to a minimum, and like I said, you end up with a very straight recoil. And I don't entirely understand the science, so I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but what that means is even on the titanium gun, yeah, you feel it, but you don't feel it. It doesn't wear you out half as much. You get straight drive recoil, but you don't get it beating you up, which is good. Certainly on quick pairs, it makes it a very nice gun. And we're not saying that other guns are not good because they recoil differently, but it's just something that is noticeable about the Longthorne. Early models had barrels that were built completely parallel, but the market, the consumer base said, that's not good, you need your barrels pointing to converge at a point, which I understand for double rifles, but for a shotgun when the center axis is, 5/8 of an inch apart, if you think on these, it's probably, if you think they're 18.4 bores, and there's a couple of mil between the actual center to center is probably 20 mil, just shy of an inch. If that was the center pattern to center pattern, I don't think I'd have a problem there. But the market asked, so Jim redrew it, and now we have converging barrels, meaning they actually will converge at 30 yards or whatever. That is positive and negative. It's positive because apparently it matters, and maybe it does matter. I don't really know. I have shot a pair of the unconverging barrels, and I didn't notice much difference. But where the action is such a low profile and the gap between the barrels is so small, because it can be, what that means is you can't have super extended chokes. Because those barrels are so close together at the muzzle, if you have super extended chokes, they'll end up touching after a point because that's just the way that it is. They come with whatever chokes you want, extended or internal. I have shot a few of their fixed choke barrels when we built that game gun, and I do love their fixed choke barrel. I love all fixed choke barrels. They're just better. They handle steel shot better. I know inherently it's less intelligent because variety is the spice of life, and as we progress, certainly in the UK with non-toxic loads, it makes sense to have the ability to learn and pattern and change that about. But yeah, I maybe should have gone for a fixed choke set of barrels, but it has given me an excuse to get into extended chokes, and extended chokes are pretty. Their chokes are quite long, and they have quite an aggressive thread, and they're threaded all the way up to the hilt, which means that the hole looks ever so slightly off center, whereas others have a more of a, I think it's a spigoted thread. You stick the internal chokes in there and that becomes a non-issue. In their fixed chokes, you can run steel up to full choke, and in their multi-chokes, it's the same. High pressure steel up to half choke, although everyone is now recommending quarter, and I'd probably go with that. And having shot a bit, you don't really want much choke anyway from a performance perspective. But there you go, that is the Longthorne's barrels. I went for the flat rib, they do a high rib. I don't really have much of an opinion either way. I think the flat rib looks better. And the high rib rings when you close it, and that's kind of cool. But the flat rib doesn't, and that's kind of cool too. The ejector system is very simple. It's two ejectors held in by two circles. If you watch the servicing video that we did with Longthorne, you'll see how to take those out. I've not had any issues with ejection. If you use old, swole, bad cartridges, it won't eject probably the same as anything else. And to be honest, most of the time with this gun, I catch the cartridges and throw them in the bin anyway, so I couldn't even remember the last time that I just willfully ejected a cartridge out and let it fly. The four-inch done on a lever design, you pull that down and away you go. It's held in by two screws in the back and two screws in the front, and the ejector kit is on this back here. The ejector kit come in 10 different sizes. So that's how they're timed. You don't have to mess about with filing bits of metal off. They generally can just match these parts together, and it's done with the same with the sears on the inside of the action that we might have a look at the end. And that is the overview. Now, things to note. Firstly, I really enjoyed shooting this gun. When we first got this stock made, it was actually a little bit higher. There's a members video of when we took 3mm off the top, or I took 3mm off the top, just to make it a little flatter shooting. And part of the reason for this video is this is gonna change quite fundamentally. Probably gonna work with a different stock. As I said, I'm gonna put the game stock on there with an adjustable comb cut in it. Now I've moved over to glasses. I remember Ed said a thing in the consultation that your gun fit might change and shooting style will change. The shooting style was fundamentally obvious to me. Now I can see targets differently. Obviously that shooting style will change, and I've not shot too much, I think 5 or 6 times properly since that occasion, and I'm just getting used to glasses. And I wear these pretty much all the time. I've got a pair of daily drivers coming, and yeah, I I'm getting better. But one thing I've noticed about this gun is it no longer feels as comfortable as it did. And I was trying to wonder why that was, and I thought maybe it was a visual aspect, because I mean, it is certainly, now I can see the rib. I like to see rib, but now I can actually see it. It's a very different affair. A lot of it though is actually just mounting position. The way that I mounted a gun before was certainly a lot more aggressive, really got my head in, I was looking out the top part of my eye. Even with these glasses that sit very high on my face, I mean, I've tried various glasses to see whether I can combat the issue. There's never a moment where it feels quite as comfortable when not wearing glasses. And I know that you shouldn't not wear glasses when you shoot. But now that I need the glasses, probably sounds a little bit sillier. Now I'm much more aware of what the glasses are doing for me rather than just wearing a pair of tinted ones that aren't a prescription. I notice very much that I don't enjoy looking at the top part of the glasses so much. I prefer sitting my head in a different position, and that's just something that's come about. Firstly, now I'm using my eyes a lot more because they actually work. I'm not just kind of poking and praying. The stock fit has changed because of the way my head now wants to sit. So that's something that we're going to be exploring over the next few months. Again, not while doing anything to this, not until we've figured out where we want to go, because it's such a beautiful piece of wood and such a beautiful glove grip. I don't want to start mucking with it until I'm happy with an outcome. Whereas that game stock, and I don't use that all too often, I think cutting an adjustable comb in that and working with that over the next sort of few months to really refine what's going on with me and my eyes and my shooting style and my gun fit makes some sense. So it makes sense at this point, like I said, to document this gun and where I'm at with it. Good points. Recoil is minimal. Recoil is really minimal. And I know it sounds silly because it's a relatively heavy gun at nearly 8 pounds or in that ballpark, that it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But I've shot 8-pound guns that weren't pleasant to shoot. I can shoot this all day long with Pro 1s and Pro 5s, and it feels very, very minimal. Obviously, if you pick it up after shooting a little 20 ball with 21-gram cartridges, it feels more thumpy, or if you put Winchester 1 1/8 ounce AA in there, that hurts too. Point 2 would be that the way that it handles is really nice. It belongs in that high-end space. There's something about the way this gun moves that is wonderful. I've actually shot a 30-inch multi-choke version recently, and I really fell in love with that as much as I've fallen in love with this. This is a big gun, and it moves very well. For a 32-inch gun, it's significantly more lively than many other 32-inch guns, and that can be good and bad. Again, it's all about personal preference. The thing with these guns is that you can order them to a certain barrel weight. They'll just machine them differently and finishing them differently. If you want big, heavy barrels, they'll make you big, heavy barrels. Same as any of these high-end companies, really. I like what's in there. But yeah, I mean, I've got no real complaints. The way that it moves is wonderful. The only thing for a maintained lead gun, it is maybe a little bit lively. A lot of these guns, given that it is built by an engineer, a lot of people go, oh, this gun won't move because they haven't thought about the artistry in the gun. It has. The priority in this gun is not only the design physically and aesthetically, it is the fact that it should be able to shoot, and they really do. Aided by a lot of the things. Again, making those barrels out of one piece of steel allows a very different weight and balance profile to others. The thickness of the action mixed with the shallowness of the action allows for a very different feeling gun because you haven't got quite so much height, which means that the distance between your hands is slightly different, or meaning it's less canted. On a deeper action, your hand will certainly be in different positions versus the actual weight and balance of the points of rotation of the gun. It's minimal, but it's noticeable in a way, or it's certainly trying to diagnose why a gun feels good has been something I've been quite interested in for a few years, because it's easy to pick up a gun and go, oh, that's nice, but it's very hard to say why and actually come up with a genuine recipe for success there. Other good points, dealing with Jim and Elaine has been really wonderful. They've been really lovely to work with, and any query, they're always at the end of the phone to help, or the end of an email to help. Any question, that's, yeah, always good. The stock fit up until very recently I thought was absolutely spot on, and it still is. You know, I just pop these off and yeah, it feels like home. It just clicks straight in. But as soon as I put those glasses on, I think where I'm pushing my cheek up and I really get molded onto that gun, wearing glasses is going to change that. And well, I like seeing more than I like pedantly sticking with this gun. Pedantically sticking with this gun? That's what I meant, isn't it? Yes, more than pedantically sticking with this gun. Pedantly. I don't want to be a pedant, so I'm not going to be pedantic about sticking with this gun for the sake of sticking with it. Like I said right at the beginning, it's all about shootability and enjoyment of the process. And I know a lot of my friends over the years, or clients or customers or people I know over the years, have bought guns based on looks and they can't shoot them, and they love that process. But for me, I quite like to hit things with a gun, and that's important. It's been reliable. It's certainly been reliable. I have used it without much love and taken it to various corners of the world, and still giving it no love, and it has performed relatively well. And a couple of little blips, and we'll cover those in a second. It patterns very tightly. In there currently is a 1/2 and 1/4 choke. You generally run a pair of quarters, but I lent the barrels to someone because the barrels are interchangeable. That's a good point, is that where I've been to America a couple of times, I've taken all of my bits but the action and they've clipped them together onto it. And it takes Owen, one of their gunsmiths, about 15 minutes to just appropriately make sure it's timed right and works right on any action. And that interchangeability is it's nice. And they do a 20 bore sort of set of barrels with fins, so you can use your 12 bore, your forend. And there's a lot of engineering perfection or technical cool stuff that's right about this gun. But you know, I think it's good, and I think it's evident because I've stuck with it and shot it, and I don't stick with many guns historically. I like it. It's a good gun. Bad points. Are we ready for bad points? All right, okay. So I wouldn't say it's a bad point, and bad's a strong word. Points to note as much as a bad point. The barrels are not chromed. The barrels are not chromed, so they do rust. If you do not leave them oily, clean them, you end up with rusty chambers, which is, it's not annoying because you should just maintain and look after what you have. It's hard in a world where we're used to guns being chromed and pretty indestructible to have one that's not. I've spoken to Jim, and they can offer it as a service. It's just not something that they've done because inherently, being Jim, he says, why don't you clean your gun? Which is the right answer. This is not a semi-automatic, this is a fine over and under shotgun. You should look after it. Yeah, I've been told off for that a few times. Quite a few times. Any time Jim sees me at my gun and it's got semi-rusty chambers because I don't clean it or oil it as often as I should. But that's life. That is life. And that was it's always part of the test, isn't it? I should probably be more responsible. But I haven't grown up fully yet, unfortunately. So yeah, the barrels do rust if you leave them to do so, and that is bad. That is bad. The choking system is good, but like I said, where they're convergent, I understand why people wanted them converging. I just find it annoying that then you can't have super extended chokes. I know it sounds really stupid, but that super low profile action, as well as being technically really, really good, suddenly, it's not really a bad point, but it is a point of note. And that being the case, there aren't many aftermarket offerings for them, because if you make them as long as many aftermarket chokes, they might touch. They might touch. If you make them too wide, they might touch. I mean, it's ridiculously close, isn't it? And that's part of the beauty of it. So I'm not complaining, but it is a point of note, I think. A fixed choke version, and then you don't have to worry about these kind of silly things. And to be fair, if you spoke to me 5 years ago, I would have laughed at me for having extended chokes. Now, in fact, I wouldn't believe that I ever had to have extended chokes. The rib, it doesn't have a tram line on it. I know that's going to really be a stupid thing to say, but I kind of like a tram line on a rib. And that's not a negative, but part of a monoblock barrel, when you basically get all your components and you clip them together, means that the monoblock, the barrels, they tube in, the mid ribs, and then all they have to do is choose which top rib they want to put on. When you're making a barrel out of one piece of steel, it's a very different affair to change what you do with your top rib. I love the machining on it, I love the way it looks, but I'd also like tram lines. Maybe I would have liked tram lines. I'm still learning what my eyes like, to be honest. I shot guns with beads for the last 2 or 3 times recently, and where I, over the last few years, haven't done so well with a beaded gun, felt unbelievably good now I can see. And that's it's an interesting thing to show why shooting is so personal, and one man can't really give advice to another unless they have a whole pile of experience. And I suppose over the course of this process and owning this gun and doing a few videos with Ed Lyons and Ed Solomons, I've really benefited from their knowledge and such. And that's interesting that everything they say is very undefinitive. undefinitive, unless it is one of those definitive facts, but it's a case of every person is different. And when you phone these people and speak to them, it's a case of, if that is working for you, then that's something we need to explore. The biggest issue I've had with this gun, again, isn't entirely down to a self-maintenance issue, is that there's two little pits in the fore end that if you don't put them in, it's going to sound really stupid now, I'm thinking to myself, if you don't make sure they're tight every 5,000 rounds, it's quite hard to open the gun, because when metal comes out and fills a hole that that metal didn't have to fill, guns jam. And I don't think that's a bad design by any accounts. It is just something to note. And that's the only thing I've had with this gun. And I know I've spoken to Jim, and I'm the only person who's had it. And it's probably down to that whole abuse. I'm not a gun abuser, but maintenance thing. But that's one of those things that it's happened 3 times, that you get the gun, bang, bang, you go to open it and it doesn't open. And that's all just down to those parts there. But you take it off, take the fore end off, put them in, click, and away it goes. And that's just a maintenance thing. Other than that, I don't think I've had anything really bad go wrong with it. I haven't had any light strikes. I've not had any cartridges slip past ejectors. I've not had any chronic unreliability. And that's pretty good, seeing as I've put everything from 21 grams to 50 grams through this gun, steel, lead, whatever, in various humidities, temperatures, environments. I suppose one of the good points as well, speaking of humidities, temperatures, environments, is there's no mid-ribs to come off. And I know that depending on how companies put their mid and top rib on in hot climates where they shoot a lot of cartridges, namely America, one of the conversations out there that we rarely have over here is how common it is for certain brands to need strip and relays to have those ribs actually put back on the gun. But you won't need that because it's got no ribs. Well, it has got ribs, but they're just part of it. It's got one piece of steel. It's not got multiple components to come apart. What else is bad about it? Safety catch is a bit noisy, isn't it, Sash?
So are there guns that have quiet safety catches?
Yeah, quite a few guns that have quiet safety catches.
I didn't know that was a feature, and now I'm really bothered.
I don't think it's like a selling point for many guns. But one of the things that Sash finds really annoying is me.
Yeah.
Is the fact that I will sit there and when I'm bored I have a constant need to just do stuff.
It's not when you're bored, it's actually when you're in a high octane mode, so things are already chaotic and I'm dealing with you just doing that. Because it's a normal tick, right? You're doing something so you play with something else to sort of take your mind off it.
Yeah, well I don't smoke, so I've got to do something with my hands. You vape, I safety, okay? That's just the way this goes. Yeah, the safety catch is a bit noisy, but it is also very positive. And I don't know whether they'd ever really care about quietening it down. And well, should we take the stock off and have a look inside? So one of the interesting things about owning a gun like this that's made by a smaller company is how quickly that the product can develop, how quickly that ship can steer. With bigger gun makers, they're spending 5 to 10 years developing a product before releasing it, and that's all well and good. But, a smaller gun maker doesn't really have that ability. You have locating plugs on the back here. I think that's a lovely feature. What that means is that any issues, it's not even issues, but things that need addressing or changing can be done relatively quickly. So, over the first year and a half of this model being on the market, there have been not updates, but Jim has addressed a lot of these issues. They're contemplating chroming the barrels because he realizes that we're not all perfect. What it also means is that they can spot things in rooms for improvement and then just improve them year on year. I suppose a lot of the gun makers do that and they call it sort of an annual update. And I suppose that is something that these guys will be putting in place if they haven't done already, is the fact that, all right, this is now what we do. These are things that we've addressed. This is actually better. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but, for example, they're talking of putting certain coatings on the inside, whether that's DLC or titanium nitride or any of those kind of things. Because all of a sudden you're actually guaranteeing that all of these parts, regardless of how somebody looks after them, are going to stay in tip-top condition for years to come. And that's what we all want, right? Whether you're buying a Silver Pigeon, a 525 Satori, or a $20,000, $20,000, £30,000 gun, we want reliability. We want the ability to put it away and it come out just as good. I think the era of owning guns that are more fragile is over, and that's okay. Look at the inside there. It could be one of the simplest looking actions in the world, but everything is machined to perfection and then polished and finished perfectly. All of the sears and stuff are just so easy. And that's what annoys you, by the way, Sasha, is that spring comes down so quick. It could definitely be redesigned to be quieter, but then it would be less positive and nice. And it's kind of nice. You know, it feels like you're flicking a switch in a Harrier jump jet. It's a very positive click, but I can appreciate why it annoys you. It annoys that thing on your chest. Me. Part of why I love this gun as well is it is an extremely simple, extremely robust design. Jim has put a few cool things in here, like the way the top lever hold open button works and the way that the bites are all numbered and this kind of thing. It is cool, but the general design of the trigger plate is extremely simple. It's just a couple of sears, a couple of springs, a little spring under the trigger, and everything is engineered and to a quality and a standard that you don't entirely see in a lot of other guns where there's a lot of cast parts or slightly overcomplicated things or tiny little springs. You don't have any of that in here. And that to me is part of its beauty. If we're going to get anal and talk about things that we'd like to see, I'd like to see the engraving down the trigger guard on the Valkyrie model. I think that might be quite nice. Although I understand that they now put a different coating on here, and with the slotted head screw, it certainly looks better. I'd also love to see engraving on the side of my tumblers to match the engraving on the gun. It's a bit like the best gun makers do with their bridles. They engrave the bridle on the side of the side look because it looks great. I understand that's just adding unnecessary cost to the gun, and no one would care other than me, so let's not even mention it. Other than that, it's been a remarkable gun, actually. It's been a really remarkable gun. I was expecting it to be good. That's not a lie. I was expecting it to be quite good, but given that it was a brand new model, I was also expecting something to just not work regularly, or for the ejector system to be not where it needed to be, or for something to go wrong. I think some of that presumption comes from the fact they used to make side locks, and side locks are so fine that they just don't take the abuse that modern people give them in many regards. Not side lock over and unders. There's a reason that trigger plates and sort of trigger plate-esque guns are ruling the market. And that's okay. And that's why Longthorne built one, so that you can own an English-made gun for 13,000 odd pounds and have the reliability of one made in another country. And that's not me saying that all over and under side locks aren't reliable. That's not the case. I've owned a few, but they are fraught with more issues than trigger plate guns. There's a reason that every man's gun isn't a side lock when technically they could be made for a similar price point. Mine's about half an inch in front of the hinge, if that. And there's so much weight in the middle, you can roll your hand sort of a few millimeters, an eighth either way, and it still sits there, which is kind of nice. I like the mid-weight that's in this gun versus the overall weight of the gun, which is not as heavy as many other sporters out there. And that was that. I've had a great time with it. I've made some wonderful memories with it, but it is going to get a bit of a fundamental change next year. So I just wanted to mark this moment for me as much as anything, and give you the chance to win one on tweedle.com. Guys, thank you very much for watching. And that was that. Like I said, we've had some good times together. We've had some pretty bad times as well in terms of personal scores. But that's life, the ups and downs of an average shooter with a very pretty gun. That should be the new name of the channel. Guys, thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you next time.